In the previous section, we talked about programmable inputs. Now let's talk about programmable outputs. Let's quickly set up a couple of programmable inputs to toggle two output channels, toggle mute. So I will select, first of all, programmable input number 1, and I will select two toggle mute outputs. And let's just select output 1 and 2. Now we can quickly test that. I can push my external button, which I have connected, and you'll see that it lit up. We can look at outputs, and you'll notice that they are now muted. I can go back to rear panel control, or I can press my test button. And if I do that, we'll notice when we go to outputs that they are now unmuted. Let's go back to rear panel control. So now we've quickly set up a programmable input to mute a couple of outputs. Now we want some kind of indicator, maybe an LED indicator. We want a programmable output to change when we make this particular change to the output channels. Let's go to programmable outputs. Now let's select monitor programmable input state. By default, input number 1 is selected, and what this is going to do is it's going to follow the function that's assigned to programmable input number 1. It doesn't care if you've pushed the button momentarily or if you're holding it down. It is interested in what the function is, and our function that we selected for the programmable input number 1 is to toggle the mute outputs. So now that we've done that, we can monitor our programmable output pin status. So if I were to push my button at this point, notice that the programmable output pin status goes off, and I push it again, and notice that it now comes on. And that will follow the muted state. So if I now look at my outputs, we'll notice that they are currently unmuted. I press my button, they become muted. I go back to rear panel control, and notice the LED is off. Now sometimes people want the LED on to show that the microphones are active and off when they're muted. Other people like to see the LED on when it's muted and off when they're active. So to do that, you can simply check the invert box, and notice now the LED goes on. And if I come to outputs, they are in the muted state and the LED's on. If I press my button, they become unmuted, and I go to rear panel control, and notice the LED is now off. Now some of the other features that we can set up for the programmable output is also monitor active preset. Now this will allow us to set up a programmable output to go high when a particular preset is selected. Well, right now I know that I'm in preset number 1, so let's select programmable. Since we're using programmable output number 1 to monitor the state of our output channels, let's go to programmable output number 2, and in here let's select that to monitor the active preset. And if I select preset number 1, notice that the LED goes high. And that's because we are currently in preset number 1. If I were to select preset number 2, notice it wouldn't go high. Well, I could also select 1 and 2, in which case if either 1 or 2 or any other one that I choose happens to be selected, or the active preset, then that programmable output would go high. So that's another use for the programmable outputs. Now let's go to programmable output number 3. Now for this particular programmable output, we could select to monitor the input channel activity. And let's say I wanted to monitor the input channel activity of input number 1. Okay, and I wanted to know when it was active on bus number 4. So if we were to go to our matrix and we had set up on input number 1 on bus number 4. I enabled the cross point. Let's say that we have 4 devices that are currently routed to mix number 4. Now in rear panel control, if ever input number 1 becomes the dominant microphone, someone's speaking into it, that particular programmable output would go high. Now if I were to set this to any, then any bus where input number 1 is the dominant microphone, someone speaking into it, that programmable output would go high. So this allows you to set up situations for maybe video follows audio. You have a plaintiff and a defendant, and you want to run those programmable outputs not to LEDs, but to a video follows audio system and have the camera move in an automated fashion when a particular person is speaking. This will allow you to do that. And along with that, you have input qualification time and you have output hold time to set up how long you would like for the camera to stay there, and then what qualifies an input activity in order to move there. Now another selection is monitor hardware status. Now if ever you have a fan fault or over temperature or the real time clock battery is low, you can set up a programmable output to go high. So you have all types of different things that you can set up for programmable outputs. Okay, let's go to the next section.